Welcome to another episode of People Pod. What happens when the youngest sibling of, like, the most famous musical family on Earth just decides she's finally had enough?
It is a massive question.
Right. I mean, I want you to imagine deciding to fire your own father, staging this massive artistic rebellion to become the queen of pop in your own right, only to face an unprecedented industry-wide blacklist years later.
Yeah, it sounds like a highly dramatized Hollywood script, but it's entirely real. I mean,
Yeah.
it's this story of incredible artistic highs and then these devastating lows orchestrated by very powerful executives and, just sheer undeniable resilience.
Absolutely. So today we are bringing you the story of Janet Demita Jo Jackson. You know the name, obviously. If you're listening to this, you probably know about the Super Bowl incident, and of course you know her brother Michael.
Right.
But what you likely don't know is the full, unvarnished story of her profound cultural legacy. We're looking at a huge stack of sources for this deep dive today. Biographies, chart data, music reviews, corporate records.
Yeah, there is so much material.
There really is. And we're going to give you a complete picture of her record-breaking independence and her battles with a really unforgiving entertainment industry.
Well, to really grasp the magnitude of what she achieved, we have to look closely at where she started. Because, this wasn't a life of immediate glamour or agency. The Jackson family origins are deeply, fiercely working class.
Oh, totally.
We are talking about a family of 12 living in a tiny two-bedroom house in Gary, Indiana.
Wait, I just want you, the listener, to picture that for a second. A two-bedroom house for 12 people. The logistics alone are just mind-boggling.
They really are. Her father, Joe Jackson, was a crane operator at U.S. Steel and a former boxer who played guitar locally just to make ends meet. Her mother, Catherine, worked part-time at Sears. So by the time Janet was born in 1966, she was the youngest of 10 children. And what's often lost in pop culture history is that Janet initially wanted absolutely nothing to do with the music business.
Which is wild. Looking at the source material, her career aspirations were actually, well, very different. She wanted to be a horse racing jockey or an entertainment lawyer.
I love that.
Right. She literally just wanted to act on the side so she could support herself financially and live a normal life.
But, when your older brothers are the Jackson 5, and they've already signed to Motown and hit #1 on the Billboard charts by the time you're a toddler, the family business just has a way of pulling you in.
It's unavoidable.
Exactly. By age 7, she was already performing with her siblings on the Las Vegas Strip, stepping into a machine that was already moving at 1,000,000 miles an hour.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the mission of this deep dive is to explore the turning points of a woman who continuously fought for agency in her life.
Yes.
We're looking at someone who transformed from a reluctant child star into a feminist pop icon, a gay rights advocate, and, like we said, a survivor of a massive corporate boycott. And that fight for agency really starts right at home.
It does, and it starts with a deeply unbalanced power dynamic. Under the strict management of her father, Joe Jackson, there was virtually no room for a normal childhood. The sources point out this deeply revealing, frankly chilling detail. Her father was so emotionally withdrawn and so focused on the business that he instructed her as a child to address him solely by his first name.
Wow.
Not Dad, not Pop, just Joseph.
That paints such a clear, isolating picture of the dynamic she grew up in. So she gets thrust into acting, doing variety shows in 1976, and then lands major television roles. She was Penny on Good Times, she was on Different Strokes, and later Fame. But the sources indicate she actually despised her time on Fame.
She did. I mean, she was largely indifferent to the show's content, but the real issue was the intense emotional stress she was under behind the scenes. During her time on Fame, she was dealing with a secret marriage to R&B singer James DeBarge.
Right, which ended pretty quickly, right?
Yeah, it was annulled about a year later due to his struggles with addiction. You have to remember, she was a teenager trying to navigate incredibly heavy adult pressures under a massive, unrelenting public spotlight.
And speaking of the bizarre, high-pressure reality she lived in, there's a detail in the research about her early fashion that just stopped me in my tracks.
Oh, the earring.
Yes. If you were around in the 80s or you've seen the photos, you know that iconic hoop earring with a key dangling from it that she wore to the 1983 American Music Awards. It became this huge, replicated fashion statement. But the origin of that key is anything but glamorous.
What's fascinating here is how practical and surreal it actually was. The key wasn't some high-end stylist's grand vision for an edgy look.
Not at all.
One of her mandated chores at the Jackson family compound in Havenhurst was cleaning the cages of the exotic wild animals, giraffes, llamas, things like that, which her brother Michael had adopted.
As you do.
Right. And because she didn't want to carry a bulky keychain while working, she just hung the master cage key right on her hope earring.
That is the most surreal chore list I have ever heard. Feed the giraffes, clean the cages, go perform for millions of people.
It's a very unique childhood.
It's like she was trapped as a junior employee in an incredibly intense, family-run corporation where submitting a letter of resignation simply isn't an option. Which leads me to a question that the sources bring up. If she hated this path so much, why did she agree to record those first two bubblegum pop albums?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, you have to understand the inescapable gravity of the Jackson machine. When she was just 15 years old, Joseph arranged a recording contract for her with A&M Records. Her first two albums, Janet Jackson in 1982 and Dream Street in 1984, were entirely overseen and controlled by him.
So she had no creative input at all.
Zero artistic voice. I mean, they were generic bubblegum pop projects manufactured specifically for her to capitalize on the family name. They received very little label promotion, and while they had some minor chart presence, they were not true reflections of who she was.
She was just following orders.
Exactly. She was simply going through the motions her manager, her father, had dictated.
But then comes the absolute breaking point. After that second album, she makes one of the most difficult and consequential decisions of her life. She formally terminates her business relationship with her family. She stated publicly that she just wanted to get out of the house and out from under her father's thumb.
Which was a monumental, terrifying risk.
Yeah.
You have to put yourself in her shoes. You are firing the architect of the biggest musical dynasty in the world, and he happens to be your father.
Yeah, the pressure there must have been unbearable.
But doing so allowed her to take the absolute creative reins for the first time. She relocated to Minneapolis, teamed up with two producers named Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis, and set out to bridge mainstream pop appeal with a gritty urban foundation.
And they didn't just succeed. They completely rewrote the playbook. In just 6 weeks, which, by the way, is an absurdly short amount of time for a masterpiece, they crafted her 1986 breakthrough album, Control. And let's be clear, that title was not an accident. It was a direct, autobiographical declaration of independence.
Precisely. And it completely shifted the landscape of pop music. Control spawned 5 top 5 singles, including her first Hot 100 #1, When I Think of You. It sold over 10 million copies worldwide. But more importantly, musically, the album was groundbreaking. It pioneered what became known as New Jack Swing.
Okay, for listeners who might not be music theory nerds, break down what New Jack Swing actually is. How did it change what people were hearing on the radio?
Well, think about the pop music landscape at the time. You had a lot of bright, shiny synthesizers. What Janet, Jimmy Jam, and Terry Lewis did was take the aggressive synthetic snare snaps and heavy metallic drum machines of 1980s industrial club music, and they layered that heavy percussion underneath soaring melodic R&B vocals.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's a fusion of dance pop, industrial grit, and hip-hop sensibilities that gave the music an incredibly sharp edge.
And the storytelling matched that edge. Take the song Nasty. You hear it today and might just think it's a catchy, attitude-heavy dance track.
Yeah.
But the real-world origin in the sources is incredibly empowering.
It really is.
She was stalked and sexually harassed by a group of men on the street in Minneapolis. But instead of running back to the studio for protection from Jimmy or Terry, she took a stand. She backed those men down herself. She said songs like Nasty and What Have You Done For Me Lately were born out of a profound, visceral sense of self-defense.
And that authenticity is exactly why it resonated so deeply. It wasn't a manufactured pop persona, It was a young woman discovering her own power. Critics noted that her self-actualization anthems were vital expressions of Black female pride, playing an immeasurable role in making Black pop visible on a global scale.
And we can't talk about Control without talking about the visual mechanics. Her choreography essentially forced MTV to evolve. At the time, MTV was heavily focused on rock programming. Janet's beat-driven, spectacular, heavily choreographed dance videos forced the network to change their entire format to accommodate her style.
Which was huge.
Yeah, and in the process, she gave a then-unknown choreographer her big break in the recording industry, a woman named Paula Abdul.
It is hard to overstate the cultural ripple effects here. Paula Abdul goes on to become a massive pop star in her own right, entirely because of the platform Janet gave her.
Here's where it gets really interesting. By cutting ties with the biggest musical family in the world, essentially rejecting the safety net of the Jackson machine. She actually elevated herself to become a true, undeniable peer to Madonna and to her brother Michael. She wasn't just the little sister anymore. She was a titan holding her own ground.
which naturally set up an immense amount of corporate pressure for her next move. A&M Records executives, looking at the massive financial returns of Control, wanted a safe, direct sequel. They basically told her to go back in the studio and make Control Part 2.
But she stubbornly pivots. Instead of delivering a safe pop record, she delivers a heavily socially conscious concept album in 1989, Janet Jackson's Rhythm Nation 1814. Instead of just singing about love or dancing, she focuses on systemic injustice, youth illiteracy, gang crime, and the crack epidemic.
She knew a pop song couldn't instantly change the world, but she figured if she could catch the audience's attention with undeniable music and military precision dance, she could hold it long enough for them to actually listen to the lyrics.
That's brilliant.
And it was an unprecedented triumph.
It shattered every expectation. The sources show it became the only album in history to have 7 top 5 singles on the Billboard Hot 100, and it was the first album ever to produce #1 hits in 3 separate calendar years. Plus, the visual of her in that stark industrial warehouse wearing the black military ensemble, it made her a permanent fashion icon overnight.
The runaway success of Rhythm Nation fundamentally altered her business trajectory. By fulfilling her A&M contract with this massive multi-platinum hit, she became a free agent. And she leveraged that leverage into a record-breaking deal with Virgin Records. We are talking an estimated $32 to $50 million, which she later renewed for a staggering $80 million.
That is just an astronomical amount of money.
It officially made her the highest-paid recording artist in history at that time, so passing the contracts of both Michael Jackson and Madonna.
Wait, I have to push back on this because the mechanics of public perception can be so fickle. How does a pop star sing an entire concept album about systemic social issues, crime, and poverty, while simultaneously signing the biggest corporate mega contracts in music history without totally alienating their audience? If an artist did that today, they would be absolutely skewered on social media for hypocrisy.
It is a great question, and it comes down to how the public perceived her authenticity versus the industry norm. The public didn't see it as a cynical cash grab. They saw it as a black woman finally claiming her hard-earned worth in an industry that had traditionally exploited and underpaid black artists.
Ah, that makes sense.
Furthermore, she put her money where her mouth was. She established the Rhythm Nation Scholarship, donating a massive portion of the funds from her record-breaking world tour to educational programs in low-income communities. Her wealth was viewed as a victory for empowerment, not a betrayal of her message.
That nuance is so important. So she has conquered the industry financially and critically. As we move into the 1990s, her music takes another dramatic, stylistic shift. If the 80s were about securing control and addressing social justice, the 90s were about exploring deep sexual liberation and profound psychological vulnerability. We get the albums Janet in 1993 and then The Velvet Rope in 1997.
The Janet album experimented heavily with deep house, jazz, hip-hop, and pop. It also marked her intentional transition into a mature sex symbol, stepping completely away from the rigid, militant aesthetic of Rhythm Nation.
I mean, you can't talk about that era without mentioning that famous 1993 topless Rolling Stone cover, where her then-husband, Rene Elizondo Jr., is standing behind her, his hands covering her breasts. It remains one of the most recognizable, provocative magazine covers in modern history.
Yes, iconic.
And concurrently, she makes her acclaimed acting debut in the John Singleton film Poetic Justice, where her box braids set off a massive fashion trend that artists like Beyoncé and Solange would emulate decades later.
But beneath the massive commercial success of the Janet era, there was a profound personal struggle. Jackson began suffering from severe depression and anxiety. And rather than hide it behind a polished PR machine, she poured all of that trauma directly into her 1997 album, The Velvet Rope.
You look at the creation of The Velvet Rope, and it's like watching an artist intentionally rip up a multi-million-dollar winning lottery ticket just so they can paint something completely raw and painful on the scraps. I want you, listening, to imagine the bravery it takes to release a dark, moody concept album about clinical depression, domestic violence, and BDSM when the entire corporate world just expects you to be the upbeat, bankable queen of pop.
To take your lottery ticket analogy a step further, her label wasn't just confused that she was ripping it up, they were terrified. They had banked their entire financial quarter on her cashing in that ticket with another radio-friendly pop hit.
Right.
Instead, she changed her look completely, sporting vibrant red hair, facial piercings, and tattoos, and delivered a record hailed as her most daring and elaborate work.
It was incredibly heavy material.
It was. Lyrically, it explored the idea that everyone has an intrinsic need to belong, but we often hide behind our own velvet robes. Importantly, she also tackled homophobia head-on, particularly with tracks like Free Zone and her reimagining of Rod Stewart's Tonight's the Night, which she sang from the perspective of loving a woman.
Which firmly established her as a massive, enduring gay icon, didn't it?
Absolutely. The LGBTQ community embraced her deeply. She was honored by Gillette at the National Black Lesbian and Gay Leadership Forum. She even donated a portion of the proceeds from her massive hit single Together Again, which was explicitly written as a post-AIDS pop anthem, to the American Foundation for AIDS Research.
Wow, her impact really was everywhere.
This raises an important question, though, regarding how pop culture digests female agency. Her hypersexual imagery in the 90s and early 2000s sparked a massive academic and cultural debate. Some viewed her total, unapologetic ownership of her sexuality as the ultimate form of feminist liberation. But critics argued that by adopting increasingly hypersexual imagery, she was actually just conforming to a white, male-dominated view of what female sexuality should look like in order to sell records.
It's the classic tightrope female artists are forced to walk. And she herself stated that liberating her sexuality was an ongoing discovery and, in her view, an obligation as an artist, to be honest. But regardless of where you fall in that debate, that era undeniably set the stage for the intense, brutal scrutiny she would face in the next decade.
Which brings us to February 1st, 2004. Super Bowl XXVIII, the halftime show.
This is a moment that didn't just alter the trajectory of her career, it fundamentally altered the mechanics of the internet as we know it today.
It is a true cultural inflection point. She was performing a highly choreographed medley of her hits, and then Justin Timberlake comes out as a surprise guest to perform his song, Rock Your Body.
Right.
To get to the final lyric of the performance, I'm going to have you naked by the end of this song.
Yeah.
And Timberlake reaches across, tears open her costume bustier, and exposes her right breast to an estimated 140 million live viewers.
The media instantly dubbed it Nipplegate. Both artists issued rapid apologies. Jackson stated it was entirely accidental and unintended, explaining that the garment was designed so Timberlake was only supposed to pull away the leather bustier and leave a red lace bra intact. Timberlake, famously, called it a wardrobe malfunction.
But the fallout was anything but equal.
Let's look closely at the mechanics of this because I want you to unpack this double standard based purely on the historical record. Justin Timberlake was permitted by CBS to attend and present at the Grammy Awards just 1 week after the Super Bowl. Meanwhile, Janet Jackson, who was also scheduled to present, was forced to withdraw. Why did the entire corporate media machine crush her while he walked away completely unscathed?
To understand how this worked, you have to look at the mechanics of corporate media in 2004. The anger from executives, particularly Les Moonves, who was the CEO of CBS, was aimed squarely at Jackson. Just her. CBS, the NFL, and MTV denied all knowledge and responsibility. The FCC levied massive fines against the broadcasters. But Moonves used the vertical integration of his conglomerate, Viacom, to essentially erase her.
How so?
Now, Viacom owned CBS, which meant no Grammy appearance. They owned MTV and VH1, which meant her music videos were globally pulled from rotation overnight. They also had massive influence over major radio syndicates like Clear Channel Communications and Infinity Broadcasting, ensuring her songs were scrubbed from the airwaves.
That is terrifying.
The systemic punitive measures were applied exclusively to her catalog. They even removed a Mickey Mouse statue wearing her Rhythm Nation outfit at Walt Disney World. It was an incredibly efficient, one-sided corporate exile.
And the timing couldn't have been worse. She had her highly anticipated 8th studio album, Demita Joe, coming out right as this blacklist went into effect.
Exactly. Despite receiving positive reviews from critics who praised its sonic innovation and warmth, Demita Joe was completely derailed commercially. A senior executive at the time even admitted on the record that they were actively bailing on the album because the higher-ups were using it as a punitive measure. That blacklist continued to smother the promotion of her next 2 studio albums as well.
It is staggering to think about the terrifying efficiency of that kind of corporate erasure. But there is one detail in the sources about the Super Bowl fallout that completely blew my mind. The public shaming of Janet Jackson directly inspired the creation of YouTube.
It did. Let me explain the link.
Yeah.
Jawad Karim, a software engineer, noted that in the days following the Super Bowl, everyone was talking about the incident. but it was incredibly difficult to actually find a video clip of it online.
Oh, because it predated social media video sharing.
Exactly. That specific frustration, the inability to easily share and view a viral video clip, directly inspired him to co-create YouTube. Furthermore, the incident became the most recorded and replayed moment in TiVo history, driving an estimated 35,000 new subscribers to their DVR service in a matter of days.
So the algorithmic video internet that we all live on today was literally birthed off the back of a black woman's public exploitation. That is an incredibly heavy realization. But Janet Jackson is nothing if not resilient. How does she navigate the years following this massive corporate suppression?
She weathered it by diversifying her talents and enduring the storm. When the music industry shut her out, she returned to massive box office success, starring in Tyler Perry films like Why Did I Get Married?
Oh,
The sequel.
oh, yeah, those are huge.
She released a self-help book called True You, which became a New York Times bestseller, and she just kept touring, eventually launching her own independent record label, Rhythm Nation, proving she didn't need the major conglomerate machine to reach her fans.
She also went through immense personal changes and tragedies during this time. She suffered the profound grief of losing her brother Michael in 2009, delivering a heartbreaking, highly publicized tribute to him at the BET Awards. She later married Qatari businessman Wissam Al Mana, and incredibly gave birth to her son at age 50.
And culturally, despite the best efforts of a few powerful executives in 2004, her legacy has only solidified. In 2019, she was rightfully inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. If you look at the landscape of modern music, her footprint is absolutely everywhere. The industry even coined a term for the generation of artists she directly inspired, the Janet-come-latelys.
It's the perfect phrase.
You look at artists like Beyoncé, Britney Spears, Ciara, and Jennifer Lopez. They all emulated her specific template, that fierce blend of intricate, hard-hitting choreography, acting, and genre-blending music. She showed that a black female artist could wield absolute creative control, negotiate unprecedented financial deals, and dominate multiple entertainment mediums simultaneously, setting the standard for the modern pop star.
So, what does this all mean? When you look back at her entire journey, from a little girl in Gary, Indiana, who just wanted to clean animal cages and maybe be a lawyer, to a woman who fundamentally rewrote the rules for women in pop music.
It means that her impact is permanently woven into the very fabric of how pop culture operates today. She took the blows, she broke down the barriers, and she survived a corporate machine that actively tried to erase her history.
Which brings us full circle. You know, Control wasn't just the title of her breakthrough 1986 album, it was the defining struggle of her entire life. She wrestled control from her powerful family, she wrestled it from a restrictive and often exploitative music industry, and ultimately she wrestled it back from a media landscape that tried to silence and shame her. As you go about your day, I want you to consider how many current artists are walking freely through doors that Janet Jackson had to break down with her bare hands.
Thanks for listening to People Pod. Keep tuning in for more stories worth knowing.